Coming to you from the mountains and the plain. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire. We were trying to go a little late today, hoping that Joe could be on with us. He can't be on today. He's meeting with congressmen and some powerful people in D.C. So he was running late. We tried to push it 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but he just texted me that he wasn't probably going to be able to make it. So instead of waiting for him, we wanted to go live solo, so we make sure that we went live relatively close to our original time. So we're going to get hurt today on our podcast for two reasons. One, we're going to get hurt because Facebook has decided that we're apparently on their chopping block to be removed. So I want to pull this up so you can see it. Give me 1 second. This is what the warning that we got today. I want to make sure everyone can see why it's so important that you share and comment, and why it's so important that you subscribe to our newsletter. So let's go ahead and put up my PC, Mr. Producer. So you can see here, this is the warning. Our page is at risk of being unpublished. We are at risk of being unpublished because of community standards violations. Now, there's an intellectual property because we shared a video that someone didn't want us to share. That's months ago, so that really doesn't hurt us anymore. That's been wiped away because we've gone months without an intellectual property violation. We have one from last year, November, and that's because we talked about literally that there were illegal aliens who had committed crimes in detention facilities, and they dinged us because apparently you're not allowed to refer to illegal aliens as criminals. We didn't refer to all illegal aliens as criminals. We just mentioned that there were criminal aliens in that detention facility. They dinged us with that, but they dinged us with this, and you can't really see it, but that post, what we posted, was 4 pictures. It was 3 showing Antifa violence, Antifa thugs beating people in the streets. And then on the bottom right corner of that post, we shared a picture of Kyle Rittenhouse using his firearm, which we're not allowed to tell you was in self-defense because Facebook will definitely take us down if we say that. But basically, it was just one of these things is not like the other. Look what happens when someone allegedly defends themselves. And so they've decided that showcasing Antifa violence against conservatives is a violation of our community standards, and also a violation because we're not allowed to even possibly insinuate that Kyle Rittenhouse did the right thing. So you can take this down, Mr. Producer. What we're going to need you to do is what we ask you to do all the time. That is to like the page. That is to like this post, to comment, and to share. And the reason is we're going to have a really hard time breaking above probably 100 concurrent people today because Facebook doesn't think that we are worthy. Actually, I want to put this up too because this one was pretty hilarious. Give me 1 second, Mr. Producer. And let me get to it right here. Okay, Mr. Producer, you can go ahead and put it back up. This is something that Facebook also hit us with today that I didn't even know. So they've taken down our monetization, so we can't monetize. We don't monetize the podcast. We monetize the videos that we produce. But a new violation that Facebook has hit us with today, and I'm looking up because that's where my second monitor is. A new violation that Facebook hit us today, which is that we have limited originality of the content that we share. Conservative Daily shared content that was unoriginal or repurposed content from other sources with limited added value. So they hit us with 2 things. They hit us with a community guidelines strike, and they hit us with apparently what I'm talking to you right now about, what I'm doing in the podcast, our most popular content by far that we put out. Apparently it's unoriginal. So there's this apparently not original, the content I'm sharing. You can go ahead and take that down, Mr. Producer. So we're getting hit from 2 sides today. So I'm posting a link in the descriptions of both YouTube and Facebook. That is the way to sign up. I'm going to pin it in the comments on Facebook. Use that link. Sign up for our email newsletter because it's only a matter of time before Facebook drops that ban hammer on us. They're going to find something. They're going to make up the rules, change the rules until they can find something. So please, 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 it's in the description. I just posted it in the comments. Please do make sure that you sign up for our email newsletter. that is how we're going to be able to stay in touch with people and let them know what platform we're going to be going to next if we do get deplatformed. Because as Facebook has just warned us, our page is at risk of being depublished. So today, if there's any reason to share our content, today is it. And if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up. Please make sure that you give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. So we're going to talk today about voter fraud. And this is a very simple concept. Voter fraud is real. Voter fraud is real. Voter fraud happens. The left claims that voter fraud doesn't exist. They say it's a conspiracy theory to suggest that voter fraud happens, but voter fraud does exist. And the voter identity, voter ID, all the safeguards are in place to prevent voter fraud. They have done a very good job at limiting it. The problem is that the left, and obviously some, actually, if we're being honest, some Republicans too, find ways around it. And they either vote twice, they vote illegally. So today we're going to be talking about voter fraud because it's not a myth, it is real. We're going to highlight the cases of voter fraud because if you listen to the left, the way they describe it, it doesn't happen. And then we're going to talk about the bill that Democrats are still demanding to this day, a bill that would do things like create nationwide mail-in voting, mandate that all states send ballots to every single person on the voter rolls, get rid of voter ID requirements to secure an absentee ballot, eliminate things like witness signatures or notary signatures to verify an absentee voter's identity, and to legalize things like ballot harvesting, which is legalized ballot stuffing, where paid political operatives go door to door and even to nursing homes or assisted living facilities and just harvest votes. They help people fill out their ballots and then they turn them in on their behalf. So we're going to go through all that today. Very important episode. Make sure you hit that share button. Today, more important than ever before, make sure you hit the share button so we can get out in front of more people. Right now, we're showing 59 people watching it at one time on Facebook. The reason for that is Facebook is throttling us. YouTube hasn't gotten to us yet because we're still small on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube again, hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. So let's get right into this. I want to talk about the cases that have been in the news this week. Let's go ahead and put up image 10. This just broke yesterday. It's coming from Georgia, where the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, I hope I pronounced that right, announced on Tuesday that 1,000 Georgians voted twice in the state's June 9th primary, a felony that he said will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Now, you are being told that that doesn't happen. Now, Georgia, there's probably some Republicans in there, probably some Democrats. But when you have 1,000 double votes, and again, not every single one of those would necessarily be a felony. Some could be mistakes. Some people could have forgotten or had someone else mail in their ballot and not known, right? Some could have thought that their ballot wasn't counted because it wasn't marked as received, so they went and voted. Not necessarily all of those are felonies, but when you have 1,000 people in Georgia who are now being investigated for voting twice, not historically, just this year, and you see how narrow some of the margins have been in swing states, which the left claims Georgia is. I don't believe it, but they claim it. You can see how voter fraud can be a real risk. If people are illegally casting ballots, voting twice, which would mean probably absentee and then voting in person, because if you went to vote in person twice, it wouldn't work. You can see how big of a risk it is when you see how thin the margins are of less than 1% in states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. It's a big deal. And the left claims that it isn't. The left claims it doesn't exist. The left claims that there is no such thing as voter fraud, and that if you talk about voter fraud, you are just making things up. Let's go ahead and put up image 11. This is from this past week. This is straight from, oh, no, the other one. Oh, sorry, I had two image 11s. Let's do the North Carolina voter fraud. There we go. Sorry, Mr. Producer. This came from the past week. You have 19 aliens. These are foreign nationals who have been charged in North Carolina with illegally voting or illegally registering to vote in the 2016 election. There are their names. Obviously, these people are innocent until proven guilty, but they have all been charged with federal crimes. Those 7 people that you listed from Guatemala, Malaysia, Mexico, Tobago, Cuba, Nigeria, Yemen, they have all been charged with felony charges that include falsely claiming U.S. citizenship or making false statements on a voter registration application, and with misdemeanor charges of unlawfully casting ballots in the 2016 election. Now, these are 7 people. Let's go ahead and put up image 12. There's another 12 that were charged in this effort. These are 12 additional foreign nationals who were charged in U.S. District Court in the Middle District of North Carolina on August 13th. We're just hearing about that now, apparently, with misdemeanor charges for unlawfully casting ballots in the 2016 presidential election. You have Bermuda, Sierra Leone, Israel, Canada, India, China, Costa Rica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Mexico, and El Salvador. All these people, 12. So you have 19 total in North Carolina from a federal investigation having illegally cast ballots in the 2016 election. Now, the question you need to ask yourself is, do you believe that every single one of the people who cast an illegal ballot was caught? Do you believe that the government has a 100% success rate in catching illegal voters? The Democrats say it doesn't happen. Democrats say that voter fraud does not happen, or it's so rare it's not a big deal. We just talked about 1,000 people now being investigated in Georgia. 19 as the result of one federal investigation in North Carolina. Notice how these are swing states. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that voter fraud doesn't exist and then also claim that, oh, well, everyone that is being prosecuted for that crime that we say doesn't exist, oh, by the way, we actually caught all of them. Right? It doesn't make sense. You can't say that the federal government caught all of them. The federal government, it doesn't have a 100% success rate in anything it does. Right? The idea that the government is able to successfully prosecute every single case of voter fraud, it's laughable. It's laughable. Like, no one seriously believes that. Let's go ahead and put up the other image 11, Mr. Producer. This is coming from New Jersey. New Jersey, the city of Paterson, the Superior Court judge has ordered the city to redo its election this year after it was plagued with charges of voter fraud, which included apparently buying votes. Really, really scummy. Anyone who doesn't know, the state of New Jersey went all mail-in voting this year. That's what they did. They went all mail-in voting. So it's not a surprise that when you have a rollout without any real advance notice of mail-in ballots, right, you've changed the system completely. It's not a surprise that when that happens, you have people trying to take advantage of it. And you see that in Paterson, New Jersey, where they're now reconducting the entire election this year in that city because illegal votes basically changed the results. Or they have no idea who could possibly have won because so many fraudulent votes were cast. And now the left says that this doesn't happen, but we have the charging documents showing that it does. So again, you can't have it both ways. You can't say it doesn't happen and then say, oh, it does happen, but every single case that happens is prosecuted. No, there are other cases. The question is, how widespread is it? That is the ultimate question. So I want to pull up this. Give me 1 second, Mr. Producer. There was a case in Michigan, and there's a case in Michigan. Let's go ahead and put up my PC screen. So this was a case, and now the mainstream media has come back and said this is fake news. So this was we talked about this a while ago, last month. In Michigan, the Michigan Secretary of State said that 6,400 absentee ballots were rejected for late arrival. That's the headline that they use, but they're burying the lead because when you scroll down, let me see if I can find it. Here we go. 846 of those votes were not accepted because the voter was dead. Voter was dead. Now, mainstream media says, oh, it's fake news to talk about that because those are people that were alive when they cast the ballot and died when they didn't when it was counted. I mean, dead people voted in Michigan. 846. The question is, do you believe that they caught all of them? Do you believe that the Michigan Secretary of State's office and all of the counties and the towns that were processing the ballots, do you believe that every single dead person who voted was caught? Do you believe it? I would be happy to take the no bet on that one. I do not trust the government to have a 100% success rate in anything. Does anyone seriously think that they got every single dead voter? I don't. Go ahead and take that down, Mr. Producer. It's incredible. And I'm going to ask you throughout the show today, please, if you haven't already, hit that share button, like the video and comment. As I mentioned at the start, we're being throttled by Facebook. Usually this time yesterday, we were over 500 people watching us at the same time. It's really interesting how once we start hitting our stride again and start hitting 500, 600, 700, 800, even over 1,000 people. Yesterday, we had over 1,200 people watching us at the same time. It's amazing how after we have big days like that, Facebook comes out of nowhere and says, "Oh no, we're actually going to ding you for a post you made a month ago. Yeah, we're gonna strike your channel. Oh yeah, and by the way, we're also going to say that all this content you're creating isn't original anymore." So please make sure that you like the video, share it, and comment. Also, in the description and in the comment section, I did include a link for you to sign up for our email newsletter. That's going to be how we keep you up to date. If we do get taken down off of Facebook, that's how we're going to keep you up to date on where you can watch the podcast moving forward, because we're not going to stop the show. We're growing too much to stop it. We just might have to, if Facebook takes us out like they're threatening to do, we might have to take this to another platform. So please, please, please make sure that you like the video, do all that, but also sign up for our email newsletter in the description. So let's keep going. We talked about this a while ago, but I want to talk about it again. Mr. Producer, go ahead and put up my screen. This is a case going on in Texas where you have the Texas Attorney General is now investigating Harris County, which is, I believe, where Sheila Jackson Lee represents. They are investigating Harris County ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting. What is ballot harvesting? That's when a paid political operative goes around and collects the ballots. The problem is in Texas, that's illegal. Not allowed to do that in Texas. So I love this story because this story really shows, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. I want to talk about it again because we're talking about voter fraud. This shows just how powerful an individual can be. So this woman, Colleen Vera, a retired teacher and activist, she spent 2 years saying, you know what, something doesn't feel right. I think that there was voter fraud. I think there was absentee ballot fraud. I think that there was ballot harvesting illegally done. Something doesn't feel right. I want to dive in. She spent 2 years collecting the evidence, putting in document requests with her county and her city, right? Going to the state and getting photocopies of all of the documents from absentee ballots. She put in the legwork. And what she found was absolutely stunning, and I want to talk about it. Go ahead, Mr. Producer. Let's put up image 1, and you can go ahead and take down my screen. Image 1. So what Colleen Vera found was that as she started looking into Harris County, and you can see on the screen in front of you, she started noticing that all of the applications for an absentee ballot, not all of them, but she found a remarkable number. I think it was something like over 30, all had the same handwriting. Now, you can see the individual information there is crossed out, so you can't see the person's last name or where they live. But you can see that the handwriting is the same. You can tell through the way that person writes their H's, the T's in Texas, right? A couple of clear giveaways. All of these ballots, I think there's what? There's 21 on the screen. I think she said she found over 30. That all of the applications to receive a mail-in ballot were all written by the same person. Now, that is not a voter going door to door and out of the goodness of their heart saying, I'm going to sign all my neighbors up to vote. That is a ballot harvester, someone who is either pre-filling these out or writing them for someone so that they can vote. The question here that you need to ask is, was this person doing it with their permission? Or were they trying to sign people up to receive an absentee ballot and then hijack it before it reached them in the mail? No one knows. We don't know yet. So that's interesting. Colleen Vera does this. So she not subpoenas, but she puts in the public records request. And then let's put up image 2. Image 2, she gets from Texas. From Texas, she finds that the actual envelopes that these absentee ballot requests came from, they all happen to come from the same district. They all happen to come from the same district in the same county. And all of those ballots that had the same handwriting also had the same postmark and the same form envelope. Really, really scummy, scummy stuff. Let's go ahead and put up image 3. This is what she got. She got all of the documents. She filed for this. She received photocopies of the actual return ballot. So what we were just talking about was the applications for ballots. This is the return ballot. So they applied for the ballots, and these are the ballots that got sent back to those people who had applied. And she noticed that they were all in the same congressional district, all at the same time. So this wasn't the same handwriting over a course of months. No, they were all filed together. All those absentee ballot requests were filed together from the same congressional district by the same person. But no, it gets even better. it gets even better. Make sure you hit the share button. We got a lot more to cover. Colleen Vera got the goods on this. Let's go ahead and put up image 4. Image 4. So then she goes through it even more, and she finds that the same handwriting, when she actually looks at this district, she sees that the same handwriting goes all the way back to 2008. You see on the bottom how you can see 11/4/2008? So this person, whoever it is, who's harvesting ballots in Harris County, Texas, has been doing this since 2008 at least, if not more. And you can tell by the way they write their T's, by the way they write their H's, a few tells. You don't need to be an expert in handwriting to see that this is the same handwriting. So Colleen Vera found that going all the way back to 2008, she found the same handwriting on the applications and on the ballots. But no, she kept digging. So she identified those 30 ballots that were applied for using the same person's handwriting from the same congressional district, from the same envelopes with the same postmarks being sent at the same time and all being sent back to the same district. She then got the state to give her copies of the ballots. Remarkable. I didn't even know you could do that. She then got the actual photocopies of the ballots as they were submitted. Now let's go ahead and put up image 5. What she found was that almost all of them were filled out the exact same way. I'll say this again. Let's keep this up for a little bit. They were filled out the exact same way. And what do I mean by that? The method of checking the box. There's a couple different ways you can check a box. You do an X. There's different kinds of ways to write an X. You can do a check mark. You can color it in, right? There's an unlimited amount of ways you can actually check the box. Notice that on these ballots, and they're all different, you can tell by the actual numbers on the ballots, the serial numbers. They're all different. Notice that every single box is checked off the exact same way with the same method of making an X. Notice that they're all voting for the same candidates. And it's not just picking the first person on the list. They're voting for the same candidates. What are the odds that you have 30 ballots where the boxes are checked off the same exact way and where they're all voting for the same candidates? You don't need to be a mathematician to know that the odds of that happening, the odds of 30 ballots being filled out with the same method of an X, being applied for with the same handwriting, right? And then all the actual votes are for the same candidates. There was 150 total candidates on this ballot. 150 total candidates. And all of these voted for the same ones. What are the odds? Astronomical odds, right? You never in a million years find all of that happening coincidentally. Well, no, Colleen Vera had a hunch that it wasn't all that way. And I have to make sure I caveat this, that there were 3 ballots in that batch that did not have the same as what we just talked about. Let's go ahead and put up image 6. There were 3 ballots that did have different votes, but those 3 ballots also voted for the same exact 2 people in the same exact way. What are the odds that the only ballots in that batch from that county, from that voter harvester, what are the odds that of the 3 ballots that were not filled out the way the rest of them were, that someone would vote for the same 2 candidates and only 2 candidates out of 150 options? Astronomical odds. It's not possible. It's not possible for that to be a coincidence, and Colleen Vera knew it. Colleen Vera, retired teacher, local activist, knew it. So then we can take that off the screen, Mr. Producer. Then Colleen Vera started looking at, okay, so she knew this county in Harris County, Texas. She knew that there was funny business. Vote by mail applications were all coming from the same person because of the handwriting, all back to the same district. They were all ended up voting the same way. I mean, just think about that. Someone went to these people and either filled out the application for them or did it without their knowledge, right? And then one of 2 things happened. Either a person, same person or another person, part of the scheme, went back to all those same houses and filled out the ballots the same way, or they intercepted the ballots when they weren't filled out and filled them out on their own, right? Those are the 2 options. There's no other way that all those people can fill out the application with the same handwriting and all vote in the same exact way. It's just not possible. So let's go ahead and put up image 7. So Colleen Vera says, no, there's funny business going on. So she looks into, in that county, who asked, she set the number at 50. Let's just say 50. Who in that county asked for at least 50 applications to vote by mail? Now, there are some places that legitimately do this. There are churches that will often have a lot of these, ask for a lot, like you can see there in blue. The Blue Ridge Baptist Church asked for 50 applications. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're committing fraud. It just means that they want to have a voter registration drive, right, or an absentee ballot drive. There's legitimate reasons to ask for this many. But she identified, of the people that had asked for at least 50, she identified 2 that really struck her. One of those was Gloria B. Palmer. And I imagine that the reason that jumped out at her was because she was working on behalf of Sheila Jackson Lee. Sheila Jackson Lee is a congresswoman from Texas, anyone doesn't know, far, far left. And she also identified Sherry Harris Fisher. Not sure exactly why she did that, but it was on behalf of another candidate, Sharon Burney. Now, I would imagine, we can go ahead and take that down. I would imagine that one of the reasons that she identified those 2 is that of the ballots that were filled out, those candidates all got voted for. Right? It's not hard to make the connection when you look at the ballots and you say, oh, wow, every single ballot voted for Sheila Jackson Lee. And then you see, oh, right at the top of the list, there's someone who worked on behalf of the Sheila Jackson Lee campaign. It's not hard to put 2 and 2 together. But no, Colleen Vera went even further. This is why I love this story, because it really does show how one person can make a difference, because of the legwork that she did that we're going through, because of this legwork, the state of Texas is now investigating this. Let's go ahead and put up image 8. She then identified those 2 people, and then she basically submitted for their criminal records. And she found that Gloria Palmer and Sherry Fisher both have previous convictions for forgery. Now, I will say that Gloria Palmer also has convictions for prostitution. I don't want to slut shame anyone. I'm not sure what that's all about. I'm only interested in the forgery, because these are public records of people that in that race submitted for at least 50 absentee ballot applications, and they both have records for forgery, previous convictions for forgery. Think about that. It makes you question. Okay, so even if you were to think, what are the odds that forgers are involved in all of this? I mean, it seems like pretty good odds, but it's just kind of icing on the cake when you start trying to dismiss all of these coincidences. And that's what the left calls them. Oh, it's just coincidence. Everyone just happens to write the exact same way. It's coincidence. Well, is it also coincidence that Gloria Palmer also happened to be on Sheila Jackson Lee's payroll? Let's go ahead and put up image 9. She was paid in that year over $2,300 from Sheila Jackson Lee for Congress PAC. And she was paid for a couple reasons. She was paid as a campaign worker, church leaflets. She was paid to canvass. Now that's important. Canvass, and then she was also paid to be a poll worker. That's interesting. Think about that. A convicted forger is being paid by a Democrat congressional PAC to go to the polls and work the polls. She's been convicted of forgery, and she's at the polls to make sure that no one else breaks the law and votes illegally. That's disgusting. But the canvasser is what really got my eye, because canvassing is a real thing. I was a canvasser when I went to grad school. I canvassed on behalf of the National Association of Realtors. And I walked around. I lived in New Jersey at the time. I walked around door to door. I knocked on doors and said, hey, I'm canvassing on behalf of the National Association of Realtors. Just want to help get out the vote for, at that time, it was Chris Christie, right? And I would talk to them about it, explain why Christie would be better for their home prices, yada, yada, yada. If they weren't home, I would put a little placard on their door. One of those little door knockers, the kind of things that you might find at a hotel for a do not disturb. Congressional door hanger. That's what I would do. Ballot harvesting takes that to the extreme. Ballot harvesting means that not only do you knock on the door, not only do you tell them who to vote for, but you also have them fill out the application, send it in on their behalf, and then if someone's already doing that, you go back and you help them fill out the ballot. and then you take possession of that ballot and turn it in for them. It is a process that could only be devised by someone intent on committing fraud. There is no honesty in that process whatsoever, ballot harvesting. As we've talked about on the show before, the fact that Democrats are pushing ballot harvesting today is so idiotic because it has nothing to do with the public health crisis that we face, right? If the idea is that we need mail-in voting to keep people safe so they don't go to the polls on election day and contract the disease, then the last thing you'd want to do is send strangers to people's homes. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that is what we're dealing with. That's what we're working with here. So I want to go through that case because I think I got all, did I do all of them? Yeah, I got all the images. That case of Colleen Vera investigating, I love it. And I've talked about it on the show before. I wanted to bring it up again because I absolutely love it because it shows that imagine if one civilian, one retired teacher, local activist is able to do all of this on her own. Imagine what would happen if you had real task forces, if you had the states and the feds actually working hard to get to the bottom of this, right? She found that it was the same handwriting going all the way back to 2008. If she can find it, imagine what would happen if we actually had a concerted effort to look for it. Democrats wouldn't be able to say it doesn't happen. They wouldn't be able to say that it's fake to say that voter fraud happens. They wouldn't be able to do it. That's how flimsy that argument is. If a retired teacher at home in her spare time can uncover this massive alleged voter fraud ring, you cannot say it doesn't exist. And you cannot say that Colleen Vera, former teacher, caught all of them. That's the big point I have. It exists. It's obvious it exists, right? It's in my opinion, it is far worse. Democrats say it doesn't exist. That's a lie. But in my opinion, it's far worse to suggest that the ones that are charged, that the government caught them all. I just think that's idiotic. I think it's absolutely idiotic. So I want to go through some of the stuff, and I want to make sure I got the link right. Give me 1 second. I want to go through the different parts of the bill that the Democrats are pushing, because they're still pushing for this, right? They haven't given up on this. They're still pushing for it. Let me just make sure I scroll down to the right page. 476, I think it is, yeah. Democrats are still pushing for this. They are refusing to pass any coronavirus relief bill unless the Republicans agree to include certain things. And the Democrats are demanding universal vote by mail. It's what they're demanding. I mean, it's shameful, but that's what they are demanding. So let me see if I can get this. Where is it? I hope that the link would work. Okay, Mr. Producer, let's. No, that's not it. Yeah, let's go ahead and put up on my computer screen. So this is the part of the bill. I put it up there. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. There you go. How's that? Better? This is the part of the bill. This is their so-called HEROES Act. I want to make sure I cite the right section. No. So this is section 332 of the bill. I believe it's page 1476 is where it starts. Yes. So let me scroll back and find early voting. Here we go. Okay. Each state shall allow individuals to vote in an election. Okay, that's the early voting part. I'm a little early. Let me keep scrolling down. Ballot processing, scanning. We're close. We're getting closer. Here we go. 322. Sorry. Uniform availability of absentee voting to all voters. This is the part. I'm sorry. I'm solo today. I'm trying to work this all out. Make sure you hit the share button because this is still in the bill. When you hear Democrats demanding that the Republicans vote for their coronavirus relief bill, this is what's in it. And Nancy Pelosi has unapologetically said that she will not allow coronavirus relief, which is extended federal unemployment benefits, extended benefits to businesses, right? Helping states reopen safely, reopen schools safely. When she says that she won't do that unless her bill is passed, this is what it includes. And it's section 322, promoting the availability of voters to vote by mail. Uniform availability of absentee voting to all voters. In general, if an individual in a state is eligible to cast a vote in an election for federal office, that state may not impose any additional conditions or requirement on the eligibility. This is where it gets really, really scummy. The administration of voting by mail, prohibiting identification requirement as a condition of obtaining a ballot. So there's lots of states that in order to get an absentee ballot, they force you to show your ID because they want to make sure, one, you are who you say you are, but two, that you live where you say you live and that the address on your ID matches the address on the voter rolls. Because when you go to ask for an absentee ballot, they're going to send that ballot to the address you give them. And if you don't actually live there, then it's a problem. So this is administration of voting by mail, prohibiting the identification requirement. A state may not require an individual to provide any form of identification as a condition of obtaining an absentee ballot, except that nothing in this paragraph may be construed to prevent a state from requiring a signature from the individual or similar affirmation as a condition. So basically they're saying states cannot use voter ID for absentee balloting. The only thing they're allowed to do is have a part where the voter signs and says, I am who I say I am. I promise. That's it. Not allowed to check their ID. So even states that have voter ID laws that have been upheld as constitutional for in-person voting, this legislation would preempt any requirement of voter ID for absentee ballot or mail-in ballots. Scummy. Ask yourself this. What purpose is there to make it illegal for states to check someone's ID? Ask yourself why Democrats would be fighting so hard to make it illegal, because that's what this would do, make it illegal for states to require voter ID for absentee ballots. It's not to make the ballots more secure. It's not to make the vote more secure. If anything, it's to ensure that people who don't have ID or can't prove their identity can vote. Very, very scummy. This next part, part B, prohibiting the requirement to provide notarization or witness signature as a condition of obtaining or casting a ballot. Now, some states require you to include a witness signature or apparently also a notary. So if you're going to vote absentee, you either need a witness to sign off and say, I swear under penalty of prosecution that this person is who they say they are, or you go to a notary public, they check your ID, they stamp their little, right in their book, they stamp it, they stamp the thing and say, yes, I am a notary public. I am a trustworthy individual. I have verified that the person is who they say they are. This is legitimate. This part of the bill that Democrats are demanding, quote, a state may not require notarization or witness signature or other formal authentication other than voter attestation as a condition of obtaining or casting an absentee ballot. Right there. The only method a state would be allowed to use to verify the identity of someone casting an absentee ballot would be their own voter attestation, which is the voter signing and saying, I promise I am who I say I am. That's it. That's the standard Democrats want to impose. The deadline for returning ballots, they want to change that. The application for all future elections at the option of an individual, a state shall treat the individual's application to vote by absentee ballot by mail in an election for federal office as an application to vote by absentee ballot by mail in all subsequent federal elections held in the state. So if you go in, if the Democrats get their way, which is what they're demanding, if you go in and say, hey, I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to be out of town. I need an absentee ballot. I want to make sure I vote, but I'm going to be traveling for work. Give me an absentee ballot. What this provision would say is that the minute you say you need an absentee ballot, the state would be required to send you absentee ballots every subsequent federal election. So you're out of town once, and I just need an absentee ballot. This would require them to keep sending you them in every subsequent election. So if you move away and don't tell the state what happens, an absentee ballot ends up getting sent to your old address without you even asking for it. And whoever lives there now, it's up to them to decide what they do with it. Do they turn it back in? Do they destroy it? Do they fill it out themselves? Do they hand it over to the ballot harvester who knocks on their door? Who knows? The point is, that's why it's so dangerous to have unsolicited. Trump calls these unsolicited ballots. It's so dangerous because when you're not soliciting them, right? Like I recently applied, I registered to vote. I am checking in with the state of Texas every single day to make sure that I'm registered to vote. Right? I'm not going to vote absentee. My wife is because she's pregnant and she's slated to give birth roughly around the election. So she wants to just vote absentee and just get it over with, right? But she's asking for the ballot. When you don't ask for the ballot, when it's unsolicited, what you have is you have ballots going all over the place, and the people that they're being sent to don't even know they're coming. They don't even know they're coming. So if a ballot goes missing in the mail, me and my wife, we're on it. We're looking for my registration to go through. We're looking for her absentee ballot to appear. We're on it. And if it doesn't show up by a certain date, I'm marching down to the office and I'm getting a new one, right? But when you don't know the ballot is coming to you because it's unsolicited, you don't know if it goes missing. If you haven't asked for it and you don't know to look for it, how could you possibly know that someone swiped it out of your mailbox? Right? You don't. It's impossible. That's why this is so dangerous. So very, very dangerous. Let's go ahead and put up my PC screen again. The due process requirements for states requiring signature verification. This is really interesting. So North Carolina this week has started reporting their absentee ballots. And the first report said that 24% of the absentee ballots that had been submitted were tossed out. They weren't eligible. Right? Think about that. On the first day, the first report of the first day, North Carolina said that 24% of the absentee ballots they'd received were not eligible to be counted. A lot of the times it's because the signatures don't match, which sometimes is fair. Sometimes people's signatures change over time, right? Sometimes it's just people being overly scrutinizing the signatures, right? I've never gone to vote in person and had them say, no, you can't go because your signature doesn't match. That's never happened to me. It only really happens in absentee ballots because the likelihood for fraud is so much higher. But what this provision would do is it would require states to notify everyone whose signature wasn't valid for whatever reason and give them 10 days to correct it, which on a case-by-case basis completely makes sense. But when you're trying to send a ballot to every single person in the country, which is what this bill would also do, anytime there's a national emergency or a public health emergency, which we're in now, would automatically require that states send a ballot to every single registered voter. When you're doing that, the likelihood for fraud just goes way, way up. Okay, we can't certify the results because we need to give all these fraudulent all these fraudulent voters 10 days to find a new way to get their ballot to count. Now, what does that do? That gives the campaigns 10 days to start challenging, right? To say, oh no, this ballot should count. That's wrong, right? So even if the vote is fraudulent, giving the voter 10 days, the voter probably would never actually show up again. But giving 10 days for the voter to what they call cure their ballot gives the campaign 10 days to fight to have the ballot included anyway. So very, very scummy. We can go ahead and take this down, Mr. Producer. And they call this due process. It's due process. I want to scroll down to the part about ballot harvesting because this is what's really, really, really gross. Where is it? I thought I had it all good, but let me just do a control to any. I'm on the wrong page. Any person. So what this bill does is this bill basically says that any person can turn in absentee ballot. So as I try and find this, what ballot harvesting is, as I explained, it's the practice of sending paid political operatives door to door to collect people's ballots for them, help them fill out their ballots. Most states have restrictions on who's allowed to do this. So a typical absentee ballot, it's really only done for a couple of reasons. You're out of town on election day, you're disabled, or you have some other medical condition that makes it you unable to go to the polls. Now, some states have stricter requirements, others don't. But in almost every state, with the exception of a few, and those few, there have been allegations of fraud, almost every state has laws on the books that say if you want to turn in your ballot, it has to be a family member, it has to be yourself, or it has to be an actual legitimate caregiver. Now, that's important because once that ballot changes hands, the likelihood for fraud skyrockets. It does. It absolutely skyrockets because when you have a ballot harvester, imagine a Democrat ballot harvester comes up to your door and they see you have a Trump sign at your street, right? The ballot harvester sees your Trump sign, assumes you're a Trump voter. They then say, hey, I'm collecting ballots around the neighborhood. You or someone else stupidly hands it over to them. Do you really think that Democrat operative is going to turn in your Trump vote? Does anyone really think that you can trust them? Because there's no safeguards in place whatsoever. There's no safeguards at all. The whole purpose of it is just let's collect as many ballots as possible. At least with the Postal Service, you have some recourse, right? These are federal employees, and there's a case that I just saw where a postal worker was caught on camera writing Black Lives Matter or BLM on a Trump supporter's mail. And that postal worker is now being investigated for tampering with the mail. It's a federal crime to write on someone's mail like that. At least with postal workers, you have some recourse. Zach says, imagine going to elderly homes and harvesting ballots. Yes, that's what they do. It's called granny harvesting. They go to convalescent homes, they go to nursing homes, they go to assisted living facilities. And in those facilities, what they do is they go around, and there's some allegations that they're in cahoots with nurses. What they do is they basically sign up them all to vote Democrat. And anyone who has the mental fortitude to stop them, they get to vote for themselves, right? But they go around and they're basically filling out ballots for them, helping them fill out the ballots. And coincidentally, they all end up voting the same. It's amazing. I mean, they do that. We're joking about it, like imagine, but that's what they do. That's what they do. I want to see if I can find this because I'm mad that it's not showing up. I'm actually very mad. I had it all queued. It's not the producer's fault. It's mine. Let me see if I can go to sec 3.2. Let's see if I can find it. The way that the language that they do this is actually really scummy because, let's see if I can find it. Scroll down. The way that they've actually worded the language, I'm sorry, we thought it was going to be Joe on today. It's me going solo. The way that they've actually done this, it's designed to make it very, very easy for ballot harvesters to fraudulently fill things out. Okay, I'm close. EF. Here we go. Mr. Producer found it. Go ahead, put it up. Alternative methods of returning ballots. I'm really sorry, but I got it. This is the important part. Again, if you haven't hit the share button yet, hit the share button right now. This is part of Nancy Pelosi's HEROES Act. It's called Alternative Methods of Returning a Ballot. In general, in addition to permitting an individual to whom a ballot in an election was provided under this section to return the ballot to an election official by mail, the state shall permit the individual to cast the ballot by delivering the ballot at such times and to such locations as the state may establish. So it basically says that you have to permit the individual to deliver the ballot to a polling place. You have to permit the individual to deliver the ballot to a drop-off location. And here is the key part. Permitting voters to designate other person to return the ballot. As I mentioned, most states have it so that if you're voting absentee, it either has to be you who turns it in, a family member, or an actual caretaker. That's most states' law. What this would do is this would supersede those state laws and require them to change their laws to allow any person to be designated. So this is the Section 322 F2A, permitting voters to designate other person to return ballot. The state shall permit a voter to designate any person to return a voted or sealed absentee ballot to the post office, a ballot drop-off location, tribally designated building, or election office, so long as the person designated to return the ballot does not receive any form of compensation based on the number of ballots that person has returned. And no individual, group, or organization provides compensation on this basis. Now, this is what they've written into the bill to make it seem like they're protecting against ballot harvesting. But ballot harvesters are not paid per ballot. They typically are paid an hourly wage, just like a canvasser would. So what they've done in this bill, it's actually very, very sneaky. They've said you cannot harvest ballots if you're being paid per ballot. But notice this bill does not in any way, shape, or form say that you cannot be paid to collect ballots. You just can't be paid on a per ballot basis. You can be paid hourly. You can be paid, I don't know, commission wouldn't work, but mainly hourly, or just a lump sum. This is how much we're paying you. They just can't pay you per ballot. Amazing. And this is the next part that really seals the deal. Section B. The state may not put any limit on how many voted and sealed absentee ballots any designated person can return to the post office, a ballot drop-off location, tribally designated building, or election office. Look, think about what that means. States do have restrictions. Say, okay, if you are a caretaker, let's say you're a nurse in a nursing home, right? And all of your patients want to, all of your residents want to vote. So you as the nurse, as a caretaker, are authorized to turn in the ballots, but you're only allowed to turn in so many at one time. Different states have different regulations, the way that is, but you can't just turn in millions, right? You can only turn in so many, and that's a number that typically is realistic to a nursing home situation. And if you cap out, then another nurse has to do the rest. This language, in addition to not protecting against paid political operatives doing the collecting, states that a state may not put any limit on how many voted and sealed absentee ballots any designated person can return. Go ahead, we can take this off now. This is legalized ballot stuffing. You hear about this in the early 1900s, right? Where like the mob or the unions or the special interests, right? Like Tammany Hall, you hear all these different stories, right? Of the bigwigs stuffing ballots into the ballot box. That the elections weren't real. And you see this in foreign countries, right? You see this in dictatorships. We're like, oh yeah, we're going to call it the person who won the election won by 80% of the vote. It's not real, right? They're blocking people from voting against them and stuffing the ballot full of ballots in support of their candidate. That provision I just read to you legalizes ballot stuffing. It allows Democrat operatives to go door to door to collect the ballots that voters in this case would never have even asked for, right? To collect the ballots, help them fill it out, and then turn it in on their behalf. So it would make it legal for a ballot harvester to show up 1 minute before an election is over, dump thousands of ballots onto a desk or into a return box, and they would have to be counted, no questions asked. Obviously, they could scrutinize the ballots themselves, but they wouldn't be able to question the ballot harvester because the law says a state may not restrict how many ballots they turn in. It's literally stuffing. You always hear these stories, like in Minnesota when you had Al Franken, that he was losing. They went to a recount, and all of a sudden they discovered these ballots, missing ballots. We didn't know we had them, and all of a sudden the results change. We see it in Broward County, Florida all the time, where whenever you think the race is over, they're like, oh no, we discovered a couple boxes of ballots. Right? That's what they have to do when they don't have the law on their side. They have to be really screwy. When they have the law on their side, which is what would happen if this HEROES Act gets pushed through, which Democrats are demanding, if they had the law on their side, they wouldn't have to play those games. They could just, out in the open, pay their canvassers to collect the ballots and turn them all in at once. It's really, really scummy. So on this episode, I'm sorry it was a little disjointed because I was trying to make sure I got it. It's hard to get through all of this. It's a 1,800-page bill. It's very hard. It's very easy to get lost in these bills. I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to hit all those points because this is what's at stake. This is absolutely what's at stake. So let's go ahead and go back to my screen. I want to talk about this. This is the case from, close all these ads. This is the case from California where 4 people were sentenced for their role in a voter fraud scheme that bribed people on Skid Row with money and cigarettes. This is something that we've joked about for years. And so, yeah, no, they're bribing the homeless to vote. No, but this year, 5 people, it was 4, and then they had 1 accomplice who all were either convicted or pled guilty. They're all sentenced. 5 people have been sentenced this year. And if you read this article, which you can find it, it's very easy to find. There's 4 other people still waiting to be charged or sentenced, right? So they caught 9 people total involved in this scheme to bribe the homeless with money and cigarettes to both sign ballot petitions to get things on the ballot and also to get absentee votes. They're saying it doesn't exist, and yet there are cases of people being prosecuted for that very thing. If you send a ballot to every registered voter, this is what you will get. Not on a nationwide scale, but lots of small instances. You don't need a nationwide organization because Democrats have been doing this for decades. Democrats wouldn't have to actually build up a nationwide infrastructure because they've already been breaking the law for decades. All this bill, Nancy Pelosi's HEROES Act, would do would legalize the crimes they've already been committing. So they've been waiting for this moment, and now they're trying to use the coronavirus as an excuse to push it through. Go ahead and take that off my screen now. So we talked about Georgia. We talked about all these different states. I want to end with this. Go ahead and let's put it back up. This is a map put out by Heritage Foundation. Let me scroll down. They have a monitor that watches for fraudulent voting. So every time that there is a case where there's voter fraud, the Heritage Foundation, they keep track of it. And I love this. I'll scroll up real quick so you can see. They've counted 1,296 proven instances of voter fraud, over 1,100 convictions, 48 civil penalties, 95 people have been put into a diversion program, et cetera, et cetera. So they found over almost just shy of 1,300 proven instances of voter fraud. And I love this. They have this map. Go ahead and put in the description what state you want me to go to. What state you want me to pick. Put in the description, and I'll click on that state. And we'll go through it. Let's look at Texas real quick. Texas. Oh, wow. So they've listed all the people. 6 pages. 6 total pages. Right? You're all down here. And then we're on page 2, and we're only in 2013. All these instances of voter fraud. False voter registration. Ineligible voting. Impersonation fraud at the polls, right? All that. That's just Texas. What states are people calling out? People want to see Wisconsin. Okay, let's go to Wisconsin. I almost picked Minnesota. Wisconsin. You see on the map. All these people, they have 4 pages. So they're not as many, but they do have multiple instances of fraud that the Heritage Foundation is tracking. And you go to the details. They're not links, but you can copy these and you can post about them, right? You can go out and look. So which one was I looking at? I was looking at one. So I was looking at Texas. So this is the first one on Texas. I'm not going to copy that, but I already did it in here. This is the story that first name on the list is referring to. Homeless man with lengthy criminal history accused of voter fraud in Fort Worth. So I love this because this whole map, not only do they include the cases, but they also include shortened links for you to be able to find it. Now, I'm sure some of the links will be broken as time goes on. That just happens. What other states do people want to see? So people said Missouri. Let's go to Missouri. Missouri has some. Missouri only has 2. You'll find that as you get to states that have voter ID requirements or have stricter voting requirements, these lists are smaller. But in the converse, Democrat blue states that typically are not looking for voter fraud, the list also could be smaller because they're not actively searching for it. So Missouri has a ton. What other states? California, I imagine, has a bunch. Oh no, California only has 4. See, that's what I mean. California isn't actively searching for these, so the list isn't that long. But you know that this is not. Let's look. The page 1 has 2020. Let's go to page 4. What year is page 4? 1993. Okay, so it's a big jump there. So there's a big jump from 2001 to 1993. It's not a full list, and I don't think Heritage says it's a full list, but it provides you with a look because. Again, Democrats are saying this doesn't happen. What other states are people in the comments section saying? Arizona. Let's look at Arizona. I'm always afraid I'm going to pick the wrong state. Arizona. Arizona has 2 full pages. Duplicate voting. Lots of duplicate voting. Lots of people from 2016 caught duplicate voting. Someone just says New Mexico. New Mexico has a shorter list. Now, is that because New Mexico is a blue state? I don't know. But if Arizona has a long list and Texas has a long list and New Mexico is right in between, the idea that this isn't happening in New Mexico, I just don't buy it. It was interesting. I went to Delaware. Joe Biden's home state, has no recorded instances. Now, does anyone truly believe that there is not a single person illegally voting in Delaware? No, you can't believe it. It's just not believable. But according to Heritage Foundation's thing, Delaware doesn't have any. So someone said Michigan. Michigan, only 1 page. Again, is that because it's a Democrat state? I don't know. I mean, I imagine that it's harder to get earlier instances of voter fraud because it looks like this was probably created in the mid-2000s. So that might be why some of these states are limited like that. But it really makes you wonder whether it's because there are blue states, blue governors. Someone said Oregon. I almost did Washington. See, it's tricky. Now, Oregon has 1 page, and it only goes back to 2000. Now, that's not to say that no one has committed voter fraud in Oregon before 2000. That's just saying that this registry doesn't have anything before 2000. I want to click on Colorado, because Colorado has universal mail-in voting. And so Colorado has universal mail-in voting, and they still are reporting voter fraud. So that's one of the things that the left always likes to say, is that the states that have universal mail-in voting, where people already automatically receive a ballot, they like to say that there isn't voter fraud. Colorado has universal mail-in voting, and you can see that in the years since that was enacted, they have had voter fraud. They said, let's go to Washington State. I'm not going to do all these. Washington State. Washington State has, now this is interesting, Washington State, they're not showing any voter fraud since universal mail-in voting went into effect. Now, does anyone seriously think that every single ballot being cast is legitimate? No, we've spent a whole hour talking about voter fraud. The idea that that Washington and Seattle, that they're safe, it's just laughable. I'll do one more. Let's do Florida. Swing state. Florida has 3 pages. So Florida has had red governors, so they are prosecuting this. So when people are caught voting illegally, they're prosecuting it. These are 3 pages. Actually, I lied. I'm going to do one more after this, Georgia, because at the start we talked about how Georgia has 1,000 people now being investigated. If those 1,000 people get prosecuted, this list will go from 2 pages probably to 50 pages, right? I mean, but that just shows, like, you look at this yesterday or 2 days ago, and you say, oh, Georgia has some voter fraud, but it's not that big of a deal. Then you skip a day, and Georgia announces that they're investigating 1,000 people. So this isn't a perfect source, but I do like it because it basically shows that the idea that voter fraud isn't happening, it's ludicrous. It's happening. And Mr. Producer, you can go ahead and take this off. We've shown that voter fraud's happening over the course of this episode. Absolutely. In states like Texas, in states like New Jersey, right? In states like Georgia, North Carolina, we've gone through legitimate allegations of voter fraud. Now, in many cases, they've been convicted. In others, like in California, they've been sentenced. But in others, they're alleged, and everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But if voter fraud didn't exist the way Democrats claim it doesn't, then you wouldn't even be able to allege it because it'd be so squeaky clean. So I hope that this was informative for everyone. Anyone who's just tuning in now, we've been hit by Facebook with a warning because we talked about Kyle Rittenhouse, so they've now censored our page. That's why we only capped out, I think, at 80 people watching at the same time. So if you like this episode, again, please do make sure you hit the share button, like it, and comment it. We're going to be hit. We're going to have to fight this with Facebook because it's pretty ludicrous to take down or threaten to take down a page over supporting Kyle Rittenhouse. But that's what happens. They've also alleged that what I'm talking about right now, this isn't unique content. This isn't original content. They say we don't share original content. So we got a couple fights we have to make with Facebook, but make sure you share the video. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Also, I put in the comment section, make sure that you sign up for our email newsletter. That's very important. If we do end up getting taken out by Facebook, very important that you sign up for the email newsletter so we can keep you up to date on what's going on, where we're going to stream after this. We're also on Parler. Make sure you follow us there at Conservative Daily. I'd be happy to follow you back. If you want to subscribe to the audio version, which tons of people are doing, make sure you do so. You can find it, all the links in the description. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podbean, all different ways. Make sure you like and follow our Facebook page. At least for now, it's still there. And at the bottom of our description, we do have a link for you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Very important, because if Facebook takes us out, YouTube's probably going to be our go-to after that. So make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can stay up to date if we do end up getting that ban hammer for stupid reasons. So yeah, sorry, today was a little bit hectic because Joe wasn't in. He's in D.C. meeting with congressmen. I'm not there because my wife's pregnant. I'm not allowed to leave the house. She doesn't want to get sick, which I understand. But Joe's there having a good time without me. So that's why I was solo today. Sorry if it was a little hectic trying to do this all myself. This is going to be it for this edition of the podcast. My name is Max McGuire. Remember that the fight to take back our country clearly isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.